looking at the rankings like that and just seeing how every single game can impact your team is something that's fun. And like I said, a lot of fans are like, well, it doesn't matter what the other teams do, as long as my team goes and wins. Well, that can be true, but we've seen it every year. That team that's sitting just outside the playoffs would be in if some of the other teams took losses, So yeah, it's up to you. If you go undefeated, great, you're in this format. I don't see any um, undefeated team not making it, except for maybe if you have two group of five teams win out. But even then, you could see two group of five teams come in, and I think eventually we'll see that. Um, remains to be seen. But I'm recording this beta as we, enter week 11 here. Um, and we're really getting into the meat of it. I think this is a really interesting time of the season because nobody's locked in. I mean, you might look at teams like Indiana, Ohio State, 95+% chance to make it, but guess what? I mean, they both have, in Indiana's case, they have 3 games left. Ohio State has four. um, what happens if they lose all those games? Are they making it in? They're certainly not the number one seeds. They might not make the Big Ten championship, and then they get edged out. Extremely unlikely, but nobody's locked in yet. We've seen it in the past. I mean, Miami last year fell apart in November. Ohio State dropped that game to Michigan. It gets shook up, and now, no longer do the buys in the playoff belong only to the conference champions. So those seeds matter. And, there's still the opinion out there that maybe that fifth seed is just as good as getting one of those first round buys. You're playing probably the group of five champion. They have lesser athletes, whatever, but they can still beat you. If you get that buy, you're already one step closer to that national title game. That might seem obvious, but the argument can be made that that fifth seed's better. You go, you know, play that, get that win, and then you're playing the four seed. You don't have to run the risk of playing that one seed in the first 2 rounds. So, it really just depends on the year and how much parity there is. It's interesting looking at it, in a 14 playoff scenario, some years there's a clear four teams that deserve it. And if, some years there's five or six teams that deserve it, but only four can make it. Some years you got two teams that are way above everybody else. You get into this 12 team scenario. I don't think that 12th ranked team that gets edged out by the group of five champion has any right to complain. I mean, if you want to play for a championship, you need to be ranked in that top 11, or you need to win your conference. If you can't do that, I don't think you get a gripe. you know, uh, and maybe you can say, oh, we should have gotten in over, you know, whoever was ranked 11th. But at the end of the day, you control your destiny enough to, try to make it in that top 10. So I really like the expanded playoffs. I really like that those group of five teams at least get an opportunity. I don't know if we'll ever see one win, but it's fun that they get to make those Cinderella runs. I mean, it's part of the reason March Madness is such an entertaining sports event because you always have those teams that aren't expected to make it far, make it. And I think we'll see that, in the future. We haven't seen it so much yet. We're one year in. There were some upsets once we got to the playoffs, but Ohio State goes and runs the table. They were one of the favorites for most of the season last year. They dropped that game to Michigan, but they were still one of the favorites going into the playoffs. So anyway, now we get the first official college football playoff rankings tomorrow. But today's Monday. I'm giving myself a light day. We're gonna have some fun, record this little beta test. So we're just going to go through the AP rankings now. One thing that I like about the college football, or sorry, the CFP rankings, well past the AP poll, is it's committee rankings. So you don't end up with these weird results like Texas at 13 and Oklahoma at 11. You're going to have some teams that still don't respect Texas. or sorry, some voters that still don't respect Texas because, well, they've taken some bad losses. They look bad in a couple games, but you can't put them two votes behind or two rankings behind a team they beat when they both have two losses. I think if it's a committee, either there's going to be a big gap or they're going to respect the head to head and put Texas over Oklahoma. Even weirder in the coaches poll, which most people don't pay attention to. I always like to take a look at it. Texas is one rank behind Oklahoma. So if you had a committee there, there's no way that that happens. They're going to put Texas above Oklahoma, or they're going to put a bigger gap in there. Um, and it's important because they're at 11 and 13, 12 and 13 in those polls. They're very much alive in the playoff race. But I'm going to get into what I view as sort of a tiered ranking. The way I want to do it kind of is looking at the tiers. So in that one tier, Ohio State is far and away right now the number one team. IU, Indiana's coming in at two, Texas A&M at three. That's your tier one. And what I mean by that for me is I'm looking at, okay, what teams have an argument to be number one? You could maybe argue BYU. I mean, it depends on how much you just value just being undefeated. I don't see how anybody could really look at the results and the resume and say BYU belongs with those other three. They just don't have the quality wins. Now they beat Utah. That's a very quality win, but they've also struggled a little bit, come close in a couple games. It's just not the overall strength of schedule. If you want to put BYU in that tier one, is that just an argument for them to be number one or be in tier one? I don't have a problem with that. Obviously, that they're coming in at number eight in the AP poll, so they're not really that close. But you could say the argument could be made. But I'm just having Ohio State, IU, and Texas A&M. Those are the top three teams in the AP poll. I don't have a problem with anybody arguing for any of those teams being number one. If you look at what they've done on the field overall, I mean, Texas A&M has had closer games than the other two, which is why I think they come in at number three. But they have, I mean, some pretty impressive wins on their resume. They've looked pretty good. They have playmakers, they have depth. Um, Going and winning at LSU, I don't care what the year is, that's hard to do. Although I think some energy was down in that building on that day. I mean, if you watched after the game, you could see fans begging recruits to consider coming to them anyway, which was kind of a sad sight to see. That was a pretty deflated building compared to what it normally is. But you have to respect that they went and won at Notre Dame. It's a close game. I think IU's win at Oregon is more impressive than that. Not only is Oregon the higher ranked team then and now, but they won in a little bit more dominant fashion. But they beat Florida handily. They beat Mississippi State handily. Their non-conference is slightly more impressive than Indiana's, but not really. I mean, Kennesaw State is actually a pretty respectable team. That Indiana beat. Old Dominion is a mid-tier group of five, but Utah State and UTSA, I mean, are they that much more quality? I don't think so. Um, but you look at it as a total, I think IU has the better win. And you could argue that dismantling of Illinois was better than Texas A&M's win at LSU. It's all debatable. Those are the top three. I like the order that the AP has them in. I think the stronger argument is Indiana over Ohio State compared to Texas A&M over the other two. But I put Ohio State at number one. If they're on a collision course with IU for the Big Ten championship, assuming all three of those teams went out, there will be a clear number one. I think at the end of the day, or if they all went out in the regular season, it's going to be whoever wins the Big Ten versus A&M who wins the SEC. It's probably going to be the Big Ten team that comes out on top because they either went and beat the number one team or the number two team. Ohio State and Indiana playing each other. A&M, let's say they play Bama. also very, very impressive, but it's hard to argue. Bama will probably be that number four team, assuming all four of those teams continue to win out in the regular season. So, we'll see how that plays out, but I think we will get a clear picture as far as the top four or five, if things go the way we expect them to go, um, throughout the regular season. But history teaches us not to expect that. There will be shakeups, and a lot of these teams are going to play each other and cannibalize each other. Looking at the top 15 or so, Georgia plays Texas. They play Georgia Tech still on the schedule. Oregon has to go and play at Iowa, who's the number 26 team in the AP poll, number 24 in the coaches poll. Um, that's a hard place to play at Iowa. That's the closest game really that Indiana's had this year. Uh, took them to the end of the game really to put Iowa away at Kinnick. Oregon also has to play number 20 USC, number 24 Washington. I think that's at Washington, and they play at Iowa. They host USC, if I'm not mistaken. That's tough slog. Odds are they drop one of those games. If they go and win out, they're going to be, in contention for one of those buys. Even though right now it looks like they won't make the title game. They don't need to win the title for the Big Ten anymore to get that buy. They just need to be in the top four. So, playing this out, the ACC's kind of a mess. The Big 12's kind of a mess. The American Conference has a lot of contenders. This is going to be really, really interesting. I mentioned earlier, do we ever think that two group of five teams might ever make the playoff? And I don't think it's going to happen this year, but it could. Um, Memphis and James Madison, for example, if they win out, um, maybe they have a shot. I don't think so, but stuff could get shaken up. There could be a chaos scenario. Memphis still plays a good Tulane team, um, a decent East Carolina team, and a good Navy team. They win that out, and then say lose to James Madison in the championship game. You know, I'm stream of consciousness here. I'm looking at. I think some crazy, crazy stuff would have to happen for that to play out where both get in. But hey, we've seen crazy stuff in this sport. I don't think this is the year that it happens, but at some point you could see, an undefeated Mountain West team and an undefeated American Conference team both make the playoffs. I think that's what's kind of exciting about this expanded playoff. But now we're down to only four undefeated teams. They're all Power Four teams. But with only 4 weeks left in the season, we still have a lot of teams that could make their way into the playoff. Looking at the ESPN odds on their playoff predictor, they have what, 6, 12, the 24 most likely teams to make it. And one at the bottom is Michigan with 13%. That's not small potatoes. So, and Michigan only has one conference loss. If they win out, and I know they have to play Ohio State, but they're playing them at home, and they have a history of beating and upsetting Ohio State. So let's say they do beat them, they could find themselves in that Big Ten championship game. Let's say they win that against presumably Indiana, they're going to go, obviously, as Big Ten championship champions. If you're using the playoff predictor, it puts them as a 4 seed. Which right now, to go from the least likely of the top 24, and all they have to do is win at Northwestern, at Maryland, which is doable for them. They're heavily favored in both those games. And then they go and pull off a big upset against Ohio State, which they did last year at Ohio State. Now all of a sudden they go to the Big Ten championship, win or lose, they should be in the playoffs. If they win, ESPN, this simulation is going to be different every time you put it in. Has A&M as the 1 seed because Ohio State in the scenario has lost, Indiana as the 2. This is assuming Indiana has lost the Big Ten championship game to Michigan, but they still put Indiana at the 2. Bama at three, Michigan at four, and in this scenario, Ohio State beats James Madison, um, and plays a rematch against Michigan. Um, Really kind of interesting stuff. There's a million scenarios, and this particular simulation has Ohio State going and winning the whole thing. So I mean, it really mirrors last year. And to circle back to what I was talking about, this particular simulation actually has South Florida as the 11 and James Madison as the 12 seed. So, right there, something that I figure will take many, many years to happen, being having two group of five teams in the playoffs. It's here in the first simulation we've done on the show. But my point in running through all that is that, even that last team, as far as odds to make it in, could go and become a top four seed. Yeah, there's only 4 weeks left in the season, but nothing is locked in. None of those teams that you assume is a lock for the playoff is yet. I mean, we look at that and we have Indiana and Ohio State taking a loss. What if one of those loses two games? They're probably still in. If they lose three, they might be out. It's unlikely, but that's what we love about college football is crazy things happen, and anybody can really make a run. Um, this has Utah versus Ohio State for the championship. Um, Now, I've seen a lot of content online about, who's eliminated, who is out of the playoff contention. I would argue a lot of those, they have teams that have four losses in the Power Four. They're officially out. I would agree with that. I mean, historically, I think that there would be probably no occasions, maybe very few, where a four-loss team is in that top 11. Um, let's see. I mean, let's go back to a random year. 2012 final rankings. The 11th ranked team was a two-loss, Clemson. Um, you know, the first four-loss team to find themselves in the rankings is Texas at number 19. Um, Go back to, let's say, 2009. The top four-loss team was Nebraska. Really interesting. At number 14. They're close. That's closer. But, I would consider a four-loss team to be effectively out. But what a lot of these, you know, playoff eliminators, that you'll see floating around online are not factoring in is the chance to win a conference title. So, who's mathematically eliminated from making a uh, conference championship run? Because you can't be eliminated from this playoff format until you're eliminated from your conference championship. That might not be true for the group of five teams as much, but they got to put five in. They have to put five conference championships in there. So even if you're a 25th ranked group of five champion, if no one else is ranked in the group of five, then you're in. And the committee respects conference championships as well. So that could be enough to boost you in. If two bad group of five teams win the American and the Mountain West, who, I would consider to be the SEC and Big Ten of the group of five, if you will. Um, if two of the lesser teams win there, you never know what might happen. So if you're trying to say, that certain teams are eliminated from the playoffs, you have to consider their odds to not even their odds, but is it mathematically possible for them to win their conference? So, with that in mind, let's take a look at the conferences real quick. Who's mathematically eliminated in the various conferences? Now, um, I, being the beta test, haven't gone through and double checked the math, but a lot of these teams, they're playing nine, maybe 10 conference games. I'm sorry, eight or nine conference games. So, you at this point where most teams have played five or six games in their conference, the ones that have zero wins, their own five, if you're playing eight or nine games, odds are you're mathematically eliminated at this point. I mean, let's look at the Big Ten, for example. You have four teams that have zero wins in conference: Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Purdue. Um, Michigan State and Purdue being 0 and 6, the other two being 0 and 5. Indiana sits at the top of the conference at 6 and 0. Ohio State 5 and 0. Even if Indiana drops their three remaining, because the Big Ten plays nine conference games, they're 6 and 3. It's impossible to beat that if you already have five losses. So, as far as being, let's put it this way: Ohio State could go, could lose the rest of their games and be 5 and 4. Indiana could be 6 and 3. So these are the best case scenarios for these teams sitting out of there. Now they might want, say, Indiana to win out and Ohio State to lose the rest of their games. So let's say I use 6 and 0. Ohio State goes 5 and 4, extremely unlikely. Michigan 5 and 4. Uh, that can happen because they play each other. So, I mean, take your pick. I mean, really what that means is the best case scenario for you is that Um, so, best case scenario, probably want Indiana to win out, go 9 and 0 in conference, and then you're competing for that two spot. Well, Michigan and Ohio State play each other. So probably you root for Michigan to win that game, putting them at a 6 win, Ohio State losing out. The best you could hope for is a team in second in the Big Ten who is 6 and 3 in the conference. So if you have no shot at winning six games, and maybe getting in by the head-to-head, um, you know, you're out. So that means not only are the teams who haven't won one out, but Rutgers is out, Maryland's out, Nebraska, Illinois both have three losses in conference. So Illinois lost to Ohio State. Um, So if they went out, um, they'd go to secondary tiebreakers against Michigan in this scenario. So I would say, it does not appear Illinois is fully eliminated from the playoffs at this point. Um, they only have three losses, so I mean, they could make a bubble run if some crazy stuff happens, but it's unlikely. Now you look at Nebraska, they lost to Michigan, but they haven't played Ohio State, so they would want um, to get in a scenario where um, they're tied with Ohio State at a 6 and 3 Big Ten, and then you're looking at common opponents, right? They're going to that tiebreaker there, and because Nebraska has played probably the harder conference schedule, yeah, I would say so. It depends on how it all shakes out. They could have a shot. So, Illinois and um, Nebraska are still in it. They could still make the playoffs, either as a bubble team, or through the Big Ten championship. Um, and they're both three-loss teams, so they could get in through the bubble. So really, what that works out to is, the three-loss teams are all still alive in their conference, and that will be the case for a lot of these teams. Um, throughout the college football landscape. That will change as the weeks go on if those top teams keep winning. But right now, who is eliminated? Anyone who has four losses, in my opinion. It would take some crazy, crazy stuff to happen to get in as a bubble team. But if you have four losses and you win your conference championship, let's look at like Clemson last year. I don't think they had four losses, but they had dropped some games and then they went and won the ACC and found themselves in. So, with all that said, here is the list of teams that are still alive for either the conference championship route or the bubble route, the at-large bids. In the Big Ten, Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Iowa, USC. Now, all of those are, firmly in the conversation at large, but, Minnesota, Northwestern, um, UCLA, believe it or not, Illinois, Nebraska, all could make it in through the um, championship, conference championship. Mathematically speaking, they could. And then Washington. Washington is also in that college football playoff conversation for, at large or through the championship, but none of those teams have four losses. I don't see them getting in with an at-large bid if they have three losses, but it's possible, and especially if the Big Ten um, continues to level out a little bit. For a lot of the season or chunks of the season, the Big Ten's only had three or four ranked teams. Right now, they have six, with Ohio State and Indiana being one and two, Oregon at six. Um, USC at 20, Michigan at 21, Washington at 24, and Iowa sitting right outside what would be the 26th ranked team. So moving on to the other premier conference in the league, if you will, the SEC. Now the SEC only plays eight conference games. And again, I just want to circle back, like there are a million of these playoff eliminators online, and they're all eliminating teams. Like I just looked at Sports Illustrated. They've announced Illinois is eliminated now. Unless my math is wrong, Illinois still has a chance to win the Big Ten mathematically. Now I get that you want to. Here's the thing: if you're an Illinois fan, you want to be like, okay, Cinderella scenario, fairy tale. Do I have a shot? And yeah, I mean, I think technically you do, right? You could go and get in to the Big Ten championship. It is less than 1/10 of 1%, but it's still a lot. And if I'm a fan of the team, I want to believe that is a possibility. Maybe you guys feel differently. Maybe you're a doomsday fan or whatever. You want to lose out. You want your coach fired. Whatever. I doubt that's the case for Illinois fans. But could be for some of you. And I think it's just that's a sad way to live. It's a little more fun if you have some whimsy and believe that something crazy can happen here. And side note again, Illinois only has three losses. Two, Indiana and Ohio State are number one teams. Yeah, they got shellacked by them, especially by Indiana. Um, but and then there are other losses to Washington. So who's a good team? At Washington, a hard place to play. They got a loud stadium. The problem there is that the remaining teams on their schedule are not especially good. Um, I still don't think Maryland's a terrible football team. But they've had a pretty tough schedule, some close losses, but they're hosting Maryland. They should beat them. Hopefully, if you're an Illinois fan, you're hoping that you beat them. You could play at Wisconsin, and then a Northwestern team that's surprisingly decent. You win all those, you might find yourself back in the rankings. You probably do. Um, Now the odds of getting in that top 11 that you need to get into or you know thereabouts to make the playoffs are low, but they're not impossible. So I don't really like that all these eliminators are eliminating these teams. Are they less than 1% to get in? Yes. But you know are they still alive? I think so. They have to win all their games, and they really need some crazy stuff to happen, but it can. So My eliminator is a little more inclusive of those sort of fairy tale. Now, these are absolutely, uh, I wouldn't even, they're not even bubble teams. They're fairy tale teams, but it can happen. Crazy stuff does. So, anyway, as I promised, we're going back to the SEC. Obviously, those top teams are, anybody that's currently in the top, let's say 15, is very, very, very well alive. They only need a couple teams to lose to get in. Um, or just they just need to win out and build that resume if they're playing, ranked teams. And I mean, the SEC, like they have what, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine ranked teams, four of which are in the top 10. Another three are in the top 15. And then you have Tennessee and Missouri ranked as well. Um, eh, you're most likely playing a ranked team throughout, your uh, what, two or three remaining conference games. So, first of all, I believe that any of the ranked teams could really make it in. I mean, Tennessee um, is a fringe. And Missouri's a fringe. Vanderbilt's probably a fringe. They're going to have to make a run and they're going to have to rely on other teams. They don't control their destiny necessarily. Um, but again, if you're alive in the SEC playoffs, and there will be some cannibalization within the SEC, a lot of teams are still alive for that championship. Now they only play 8 games, so it's more down to the wire than the Big Ten one is. You have two teams that are 5-0 in the conference, being number three Texas A&M, number four Alabama, and then you have three teams that are one loss: Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas. You have two that are two loss: Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. I'm sorry. Missouri is also two loss, but they only have two wins, so they're actually below a 3-3 conference record Tennessee. But I'm looking at the losses because, you know, you can't, you can add the wins, you can't erase the losses. Missouri has, four conference games left to go. Tennessee only has two. So in the SEC, looking at the top teams, the the worst that the top teams could do are Texas and A&M, or Texas A&M and Bama and Georgia, ending up and Ole Miss for that matter, ending up with three losses. They don't overlap too much, those teams. So I mean, let's just say that's the case. But so you need to be at worst a three-loss team. So that puts Mississippi State out, and they're four loss. So they're out of the at-large bid as well. So I would eliminate Mississippi State, Kentucky, Auburn, South Carolina, and Arkansas. Um, the three-loss teams, whether or not they're mathematically eliminated, we're going to live in fairy tale land because again, this is the beta test. This is Rhett's not putting 3 hours into this, so I haven't done the math. Are LSU and Florida mathematically eliminated? Is Tennessee mathematically eliminated? I don't know, but let's live in fairy tale land and let's say that they went out. Those other teams can, the top teams have three losses. Maybe they work their way in, or maybe one of those two teams wins out up at the top, and then they're playing for that two seed, that second spot in the SEC championship. Kind of like how we did with the Big Ten. If that happens, um, those three lost teams might be able to get in on the tiebreakers. So for now, I'm going to say that even though they're 3-5, let's say the Florida Gators are still alive. Um, for the SEC championship. They're out as far as at large, and the odds of them actually winning the rest of their games is extremely unlikely. They have to play at Kentucky. They can win that. And they got to play at Ole Miss. That's a tall challenge. They play Tennessee and then they finish with Florida State. So if they win out, there's 5-3 in the SEC. Um, Do they have the tiebreakers? I mean, again, you need those other teams to lose. Um, any of these three-loss teams lose if are out officially if A&M and Bama win one more SEC game each, which is obviously pretty likely. But I'm going to say, Florida still in, probably the longest shot of all, but LSU's still in, Tennessee, Missouri, Vandy, Oklahoma, and then really you have these five teams that are zero or one loss that are all very much alive. Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas. Now Texas plays A&M, so if they win that, I mean, they have a good shot. But Georgia has the problem that they have lost to Bama, who's zero losses in conference. They obviously took that bad loss to Florida State to open the season, but they've looked great ever since. So it's likely that we have Bama in. I'd say probably the most likely to make the SEC title game. Georgia, as far as those top five, is going to have a tough time, as is Ole Miss, who's lost to Georgia. So weirdly, I think Texas might have the best shot of jumping in there because if they beat A&M and win the rest of their games, it's going to be them versus Bama. Um, Most likely. So, I mean, I predict it to be Bama versus either one of those the state of Texas teams, whoever ends up winning their matchup. Going over to the Big 12, they play nine conference championship games. So, you know, if let's say BYU wins out, I think that, the best scenario for a lot of these teams is that the teams that top team wins out hurts their opponents basically. So in that scenario, BYU's 9-0 in conference. Let's say Texas Tech and Cincinnati are both 5-1. Let's say they lose out, and they are both 5-4. Now, do they play each other? They do not. So if they're both 5-4, you're eliminated if you can't do better than that, obviously. So looking at this. For the Big 12, the team that is three teams that are eliminated are Colorado, West Virginia, and Oklahoma State. Anyone else can mathematically go 5-4. Now you got to look at the tiebreakers, but I would say the rest of the teams are alive for the playoffs. Moving along a little quicker here for time, we're gonna take a look not at the Pac-12. See if you're unsure about whether or not you can be considered one of the top five ranked champions in the Pac-12. You cannot. I think they have a minimum of six, maybe eight teams as far as conference size. So in the future, when the Pac-12 expands, I believe they're going to kind of cannibalize the Mountain West and take them on. They'll be in play there, but obviously neither of those teams, with Washington State being 4-5 and Oregon State being 2-7, although they did win that shootout out there for the Pac-12 uh, to take the lead in the Pac-12, that's not going to be enough to qualify them. So both of those teams are officially eliminated from the playoffs. I mean, not even an outside shot for either of them. So that takes care of the Pac-12. Now the ACC. Now, Virginia is undefeated in the conference, although they did lose to NC State. That game did not count as a conference game because of the weird rescheduling stuff that they did as the new conference formats took place. The game they played against NC State did not count as a conference game. So Virginia is 5-0. So using the same sort of methodology here. Let's pretend that Virginia wins out because I think again that's going to be the best case scenario for the team sitting on the outside is to play for that second spot. So Virginia is 8-0 in conference because they play eight conference games. Um, then there's a whole slew of teams that are one loss in the ACC. The ACC is a mess in a good way. You have Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, Louisville, SMU, and Duke all have one loss in conference. So, and Virginia could lose three games. I mean, any of these top six are very, very alive. But then Miami has two losses. There's one, Virginia Tech, NC State, Wake Forest, and Cal all have three losses. And then Clemson and Stanford have four. North Carolina actually has three as well. And Florida State has four losses. The teams that have five losses, they're out. Um, and the teams that have four losses. So, Clemson's out, Stanford's out, Florida State, Syracuse, Boston College, they're all out. North Carolina probably will be, but you never know. Um, so if North Carolina goes 5-3, um, or Cal, Wake Forest, NC State, Virginia, any of these teams go 5-3, they might have a shot. So, my eliminator eliminates any of the four lost or five lost teams. Uh, and then, the group of five, Kennesaw State, Jacksonville State, um, Western Kentucky, Missouri State, Liberty, all have a good shot, and CUSA. The American Conference is very frisky. It's got, Navy, Memphis, North Texas, Tulane, South Florida, I think all have a shot to make the playoffs. The MAC, I don't think any teams are alive to make the playoffs. I mean, Miami of Ohio is probably their best bet. But I mean, they're 4-0 in conference, 5-3 overall. Um, they don't play. I mean, all the remaining games are MAC games. They can't go and beat some ranked team. I don't see a team from the MAC getting in. But again, this is the Cinderella story. So all you have to do to give yourself even an outside shot is to win the conference. So, there's still a lot of games left to be played in the MAC. Um, Almost all of them have a shot as they all finish their seasons mostly with all MAC games or three, several MAC games left on their schedule. Only the bottom of the conference is really out of that one. The Mountain West, they have a shot of getting, a team in the playoffs. San Diego State is their most likely, sitting at 7-1 overall, no losses within the Mountain West. Um, they have Hawaii, Boise State, San Jose State, and New Mexico left on their schedule. Um, but they aren't the only team that have a possibility to make it. Boise State could find their way in there again. They need some losses within the American to be that fifth ranked conference champion, assuming they go and win. But I mean, there's no way. I don't see any group of five team other than maybe Memphis in a chaos scenario getting in as an at-large bid. But even then, they're not going to be at an at-large if they take any losses, which includes their conference championship. So they're really going to need to, it's going to need to be if you're a group of five, you need to win your conference. That won't always be the case, but I think this year it is. Outside of that simulation we ran, maybe two American conference teams make it in, but it's pretty unlikely. And the Sun Belt, I would say James Madison's really your best shot, but whoever wins that might have a shot of being that um, team that makes the playoffs, but probably not if your name's not James Madison. So, that's kind of the rundown. I'll get a finalized list of, the teams that are eliminated versus still in. And it's two separate lists. It's the teams that have a shot on the at-large bid, and you got to include the teams that can win their conference championship. And there's a lot of overlap between those teams, but there are some that might have four losses that could technically go and win the conference. Anyway, that's it for this sort of beta test. I'm going to listen back to it, and if it doesn't make my ears bleed, I might start posting these. Thank you for your time, and have a good one.